What is up, everybody? Welcome to another edition of the Weekend Roundup here on Touchline Talk. Thank you so much for tuning in. As always, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of the content going up on the channel. This weekend reinforced a couple things that I talk about very often on this show, illustrated them very clearly. So let's just jump right in. First, Manchester City losing to Bournemouth. Liverpool get a win against Brighton to jump back to the top of the Premier League table. I say this every single season. The inevitable Manchester City win is a lazy and accurate narrative. They have won the last 3 titles by a combined 8 points. This is not the Manchester City team that gets 100 points a season. This Manchester City team doesn't have Rodri. This Manchester City team has scraped by with a couple last-second, at least somewhat controversial goals to even get to the point where they are. They are vulnerable. Are they the favorites to win the league? Sure. That's not the conversation, though. By definition, if there is a title race, it is not inevitable that they will win. And so that is what we are seeing here. Now, Arsenal missed an opportunity to capitalize on this, but Liverpool did. And I said it pretty recently, I think it was last week, that to me, Liverpool is the team with the better opportunity to challenge City and actually overtake them and win this title. We've still got a long way to go. There's no guarantee it's going to be a title race. But every indication before this week, after this, before this weekend's games, and of course now, was that this is going to be pretty close, that City are not going to blow anybody away, that they're going to have a game or two like this where they lose and you don't expect it, and if the top teams in the league can stay competitive in those head-to-head matchups, they're going to have a chance and they're going to have an opportunity to take City to the end. This is just the numbers. And so, of course, you're going to bet on City until somebody actually does it. That's 100% fair. But you have to believe there's a chance because there is a chance. Every indication, every piece of data says there is a chance that this is going to be close. And now City have lost 2 games in a row. Now, of course, one of them Carabao Cup, different circumstances. I get it. But then they also, sometimes they lose to Bournemouth or Crystal Palace or Brentford. They are not invincible. They don't win every competition that they enter. And so I really fight hard to push back on this lazy narrative. And of course, you want more parity. And it is frustrating that they've won 4 in a row. But it's coming down to a few moments here or there. They are not miles ahead of everybody else. And this weekend was another reminder of that. The other thing I want to get to and spend a little bit more time on is the Columbus Crew losing in 2 games, being swept by the New York Red Bulls after losing in a penalty shootout, which they very nearly won. And the Red Bulls came back, and Carlos Coronel started making saves, and they find a way to get it done after the Crew equalized late on to even send the game to penalties. Let's start with the basic part here, and then I want to work my way backwards logically. This is an all-time great Columbus Crew team that I have been saying, in order to be the best team in MLS history, you have to have a supporter shield, or you at least have to go win a Leagues Cup and an MLS Cup. But obviously, this is one of the best teams the league's ever seen. You can argue best team, second best team. I will take Inter Miami because they were the Supporters Shield champions and the Crew didn't make it particularly close. But you can also point to outside circumstances and the Crew's success in knockout tournaments, and there's an argument there. It's not like they finished 5th in the East or something like that. So, of course, none of that changes because they lost a couple games and in kind of weird circumstances, and they easily could have won this one. They had a 5-minute stretch where they could have scored 3 goals. and then they give away a penalty. It's just kind of weird. This was a weird series, and it just didn't go their way. Does that mean that their season was a failure, that they weren't as good as we thought? Of course not. Which gets to the point I continue to make about knockout tournaments, and I apply it to all kinds of different teams. So by that same logic then, if we still think the Crew are great, as we should, because they've proven it, when the opposite happens, and let's say last season's Crew, they're not the best example, but they're an example, win, or Manchester United wins the FA Cup last season, there is no need, and it is silly to go overboard and read more into that than we should. Because it is a set of 5-6 games. Maybe it comes down to 1 or 2 games that we're really talking about, and weird things happen. And you are not always going to have things go your way because your margin of error is inherently smaller with a smaller sample size. And so the Crew are a perfect example, which is why I really want to spend some time on this. Right? They easily could have won this game. You could argue they certainly deserved to, that they probably didn't even deserve to lose the series. They also, you could argue, should have lost to FC Cincinnati last season. Remember how they had to come back late in that game and all the drama? So, to take that one more step, if that's also true, and you want to defend the Crew's performance here and say they just got unlucky and had a bad day, then they got lucky and had a good day against FC Cincinnati. And that is fair, and that happens in this knockout world too. And they are a brilliant knockout team. They're situationally excellent. They even showed it in this game, finding a way to get the equalizing goal. That gives them a massive advantage. It's also the advantage Real Madrid have. But you can't take MLS Cup then, if that's how close they came to losing, and then use that as the reference point to say they're the greatest team in MLS history. That doesn't make logical sense. Of course, they went MLS Cup, Leagues Cup, finished second in the East, and then had an opportunity to to win MLS Cup again. And now we're talking about something different, sustained over a period of time. This is not about the Crew in particular. I absolutely believe they're one of the best teams in MLS history. And they have trophies to back it up. But this is why the regular season matters and the Supporters' Shield matters, is because you can't start changing the narrative based on whether somebody wins or loses a game. It's just illogical. So you should feel the same way about the Crew you did today, or yes, you did yesterday, today. And you should have felt the same way about the Crew, probably going into MLS Cup last season than you did afterward. Though I would argue beating LAFC again did something to at least kind of enhance that. And there are some extenuating circumstances with the Crew, which is what makes this so weird with them. Because I will argue the second to last MLS Cup they won, they were the best team in the league from the beginning. Darlington Nagbe got hurt. They still found a way to win. But they didn't have their full team the whole season. Therefore, they struggled a little bit. Last season, you could say Wilfred Nancy was coming in trying to get things sorted out. That it's not fair to really judge them based on the regular season when they were starting from brand new coach, obviously new philosophy, very intricate, detailed philosophy. So maybe I would argue they were the best team in the league last season, even though their regular season performance didn't show it. There are these weird extenuating circumstances with the Crew in particular. But generally, this is why we have to care about regular season results. This is why I get so passionate about Real Madrid not dominating La Liga. Is because that's how you remove the margin of error. That is the best way to judge who the best team is. It's why Barcelona are the best team in Spain right now. And there's always, of course, different circumstances in there. But I want to bring this all together by making one more point to illustrate this. Kind of collecting some other things that happened this week that I haven't had an opportunity to talk about. We're going to talk about Erik ten Hag, and we're talking about the Ballon d'Or here. So just stay with me for a second. If Manchester City beat Real Madrid in that penalty shootout, I find it hard to believe Vinicius wins the Ballon d'Or and that we're having this conversation about was he robbed. I'm not getting into fair or not. To me, that is, there's no doubt in my mind that Rodri wins it and we don't have the same type of conversation. Now, of course, there are, again, extenuating circumstances. I don't want to just gloss over the racism and the things that Vinicius has experienced that make this complicated. I wrote about this in 5 Things from the Week. You can read that more in there where I lay all of this out. Wanted to at least acknowledge that, but trying to also move forward here. And if Manchester United don't beat Manchester City in the FA Cup final, Erik ten Hag probably gets fired over the summer, right after the season ends. It makes no sense why a penalty shootout or one game should determine something like the Ballon d'Or or whether Manchester United keeps their manager. Again, that is just simply illogical. And I was saying that with ten Hag from the beginning, that if you were going to fire him before the game, you should fire him after the game, because nothing's going to change, and look what happened. And if your argument for Vinicius, which there certainly is one, cannot be built simply around the fact that his team won the Champions League, because they were penalty shootout away from not winning the Champions League, which is why I would have voted for Rodri. There's just this inconsistency with this logic. And this weekend, Manchester City, Columbus Crew, the way these things played out really brought it to light. So I wanted to spend this roundup talking about that. This is just one of my big pet peeves in the way that we look at sports, and I know I bring it up all the time. But this is why. Because we shouldn't feel different about the Columbus Crew. Because Manchester City are not inevitably going to win every competition they play, even the Premier League. We can't overreact to every single event. We got to take things in context and really think about the bigger picture of it. Because when you just start taking little snippets and putting so much weight on one game or one knockout result, it stops making sense as a logical argument. And we do it all the time across all the sports and knockout tournaments. You should feel the same way about the Columbus Crew today. Because you also should have acknowledged the bits of fortune that it took for the Columbus Crew to win last season. They weren't head and shoulders above everybody else. And it's a different animal when it's a knockout tournament, because you need that stuff. Every good team, every team that wins needs that good fortune. We just have to acknowledge that that's part of the equation. You don't have the same kind of streaks of luck in the regular season because it usually kind of evens itself out, which is why it's the best way to figure out who the best team actually is. Thank you so much for tuning in. As always, be sure to hit that subscribe button, and I will see you next time.